What's up, JJ Nash? This is Jess.
And I'm John. Hi, Nash.
Welcome back to the Jess and John Podcast, where we talk about the news and the class divide in America.
Class divide, economic divide, the divide. There's a lot of divides on this show.
The divide between Trump's BBL.
You'll understand this later, JJ Nash.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover. We're going to be talking about the big, beautiful legislation that passed today. We're going to talk about some dead Democrats, what's happening over in Gaza, a new poll out of Iowa, the state that I hail from, African liberation, what's that about? And
That's
then the All-American Rejects. So we have a great show for you. We're happy you're here.
Welcome to it.
We're going to start with the BBL, the big, beautiful legislation. Trump called it a big, beautiful bill. It passed today. We knew that Republicans were going to vote on it this week. We didn't know that they would vote on it today and that it would pass. I mean, they could have voted as early as last night. It was kind of up in the air. Something that Senate Republicans are doing is scheduling votes at like 10:30 p.m., 1 a.m. when no one's around. They're really trying to create chaos to avoid public accountability and really like shove the legislation through. And so it passed 215 to 214. Two Republicans joined Democrats to oppose it. One member voted present. But what's interesting is this bill included the repealing of $843 billion worth of clean energy investment. And you had this letter that was signed on by 21 House Republicans, and so only 2 voted against the bill, and they said that they would not take action to reveal, the clean energy investments and tax credits. And so they went back on their word entirely. But yeah, basically this is the same bill that is allowing for massive tax cuts for the rich. So that's not good. It's not good for many reasons. There's a ton of people that are employed in manufacturing jobs to build clean energy infrastructure. Now hundreds of thousands of people will be out of a job with this bill. And so the legislation comes at a big price tag. It's estimated, according to BBC, to add $5.2 trillion to the U.S. national debt.
Wowzer.
And increase the budget deficit by about $600 billion next fiscal year.
Goodness, that's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say it was an occupational hazard to be voting on these things at like 10:30 at night, given that one of our segments here is about the 8 deaths that have happened of members of Congress from being, old. So evidently they're pushing through a nightmare agenda for the American people at all hours of the night. But it was really crazy. The thing that stood out to me, obviously these green energy cuts are terrible. I mean, I feel like most of the politics that we talk about on this show, I have this sneaking feeling that like in 10 or 15 years, mostly as a result of climate change, we're going to be looking back at what the boundaries of political debate were. And we're going to be like, what? Because climate's just one of these problems that has been out there looming forever, and it's larger than our politics has the capacity to respond to. And we just choose not to respond to it and like have the craziest debates anyway. But, there's all kinds of stuff in this BBL, my favorite title ever. And one of the ones that I saw that was undercovered, Jesse pointed out climate. That's not getting a ton of coverage, but there's cuts everywhere in this thing. We've heard a lot about Medicaid cuts, which is, over the course of 10 years, there's more than $800 billion worth of cuts to Medicaid. That's very important to my state, West Virginia. We have an aging population, and a lot of the children here are below the poverty line, to say the least, and they rely on Medicaid. That's going to hit them first. But this is also in there, a giant cut to Medicare. That's the one for old folks. That is the political third rail that you, prior to this point, were pretty much cooked if you talked about cutting. But lo and behold, from the Kaiser Family Foundation, the bill as it passed the House yesterday and headed to the Senate could trigger $500 billion of mandatory cuts to Medicare. And what's happening here is because of the method by which this bill is passing. We talked about this increase to the deficit. when you have an increase as large as this bill is creating in the deficit, there is a law from back in the early 90s called PAYGO, pay as you go. And when you exceed a certain threshold, which this bill does, it mandates that you make cuts in other areas. A bunch of the areas are protected, but one that is not protected is Medicare. And so here we go. We see the perfect alignment. Elon Musk months ago goes on a talk show and says the quiet part out loud that the biggest area for cuts are entitlements, and that's Social Security and Medicare. Over and over again, we hear, "Oh, we're not going to touch Social Security and Medicare because that would be political suicide." But here it is, $500 billion in cuts coming down the pike if Congress passes this thing as it did last night and takes no more action. So that's another thing that's tucked into this BBL nightmare, which I think is the title of the pod, maybe.
Yeah, something I will say is BBC reported on this, saying that this is the result, or the result of this, rather, is Moody's downgrading the U.S. credit rating.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically saying the ballooning interest payments on the debt is what is resulting in Moody's downgrading the U.S. credit. I don't think that because we're adding money to the national debt, Moody's has made this decision. I think this decision has come from a few things. Trump's chaotic policies around tariffs. It has come from Trump floating the idea that the U.S. would default, which really is what that credit rating is about, is if I buy U.S. Treasury bonds, is that a good investment? Is it a safe investment? And the U.S. prints its own dollars. If they want to make good on that investment, they will. But if the president of the United States is floating the idea of default and we're losing our position in global trade, these are things that make people question the value of the dollar in the future, and the stability of the U.S. financial system as a whole and monetary system as a whole. And so
that's the art of the deal, baby. Come on.
Yeah. What do you mean? We fucked over our boy China.
Our boy. You gotta know.
So yeah, now we have this BBL that absolutely sucks, and I see it as it's a whole plan to just make life harder for working class people, right? They don't want us to have social services. They want us to be willing to take a job for incredibly low wages and work most of our waking hours just to get by. Well, their taxes are cut in the same piece of legislation. But also this means that we're going to rely more heavily on the ruling class, and many working people will forcibly be more subservient to them. This is totally about a power transfer. And I honestly think that what happened under COVID, working people being called essential, all of the labor activity we saw, Amazon winning a union, we saw union favorability on the rise in America. I think this is a response by the ruling class. Hey, get back in line. This isn't how we want it to be in America.
Oh, you bet. And they really popped off, if you know what I mean. Let's run through some of this BBL, some of the stuff in this BBL. This big, beautiful legislation includes cuts to Medicaid. We talked about those being $880 billion over 10 years. Implications of that, 14 million people could lose their coverage. A lot of children rely on that program. The Medicare has a secret cut in there as a result of this PAYGO rule that is about $500 billion over 10 years. There are cuts to SNAP, the food stamps program, of about $120 billion over 10 years. That would affect up to 3 million people using those benefits. Social Security so far, not directly named in here, but they've been doing all kinds of stuff to make it harder for the beneficiaries of Social Security to access that. Forcing people to go into offices and, making the online payment portals difficult for people to navigate. But then, of course, it's not all cuts. We've got the first $1 trillion defense bill with all of Trump's billionaire cabinet, sticking their snout in the trough of that. You have increases to border security. The people who are supplying our timelines with nightmarish abductions off of the street. And, the list goes on, but I'd be remiss not to talk about it extending Trump's first round tax cuts where, over 90% of the trillions and trillions of dollars in that tax cut went to the very richest. Americans. So not good. Not good, Jess.
Not good at all. And what's crazy is like the money's not theirs. And because it goes to them through an official transfer that we see as normal and the way of doing business, you go to Walmart, you buy something, Walmart takes the money, they pay their workers the minimum wage that they can, the lowest possible wage that they can. And they keep the majority of the money, although it's people in factories all around the world making this stuff. It's the global working class that leads to me getting my little jar to mix paint in from Walmart. And so, why are all of the people that make the business run when I go into the store and also make the stuff that they sell making as little money as possible, but just the people who have invested into Walmart can accumulate all of that money and then it's not taxed? Like, a tax is not the government taking money that was hard earned by the business owners. They're taking money and investing it in public resources because these companies are not paying the public enough to survive. Like, Walmart is one of the biggest employers of people in the United States on social services like SNAP and like Medicaid. And so they're the real leeches if you want to talk about freeloaders on society. So giving them tax cuts is literally like the government just giving money away to people who already have so much of it.
Walmart needs to, I've been saying this a while, it needs to get out of its mom's basement and really go get a job.
We're
For how
kicking
much
deadbeat
government
Walmart
benefits?
out.
For what?
We're kicking deadbeat Walmart out. What?
Yeah,
To pay
for
for
real.
Trump's BBL?
Come on, not in my house, not in my America.
I will not pay for Trump's BBL with my hard-earned dollars I made talking shit on the internet.
Yeah, come on. Hands off, everybody. I want to say a note about another note about this Medicare cut, right? This is happening through this weird thing I've talked about. It's called PAYGO. But I want to do a comment on the Democratic strategy here. Again, we talk a lot about what the Democrats are up to, but in this Medicare cut in Trump's big, beautiful legislation, you see the ghosts of Democratic failures of the past coming back to cut Medicare. So what I'm talking about here, the law that is going to mandate cuts to Medicare that has been passed in this legislation, that was first really established under Bill Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, who, like, in the early 90s, they were just getting, this was right when Rush Limbaugh was coming up and the conservative propaganda machine was really hitting its stride and telling Democrats, it was branding them as big spenders and big government people. And then, of course, what Democrats do and what they're doing today, they respond to what other people say about them instead of showing you what they fight for and, pivoting to their own agenda, right? They play on other people's turf. So back then, the right wing was saying, Bill Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, these are big government liberals and they spend a whole bunch of money. So Bill Clinton and Nancy Pelosi created this PAYGO rule, which mandated cuts past a certain deficit point to social programs. And because they did that back in the day, this is now, all these years later, coming back with real implications for people on Medicare. So once again, we talk about failures of Democratic strategy on here. This is one of them, and it's all the way from rearing its head from the 90s.
And Bill Clinton was one of the worst presidents for the global economy, or the U.S. economy. What he did by having a balanced budget, everyone was like, oh my God, the Clinton years were the best because we had a balanced budget. We didn't add to the deficit. We had a surplus. That drove the private sector into debt. Because if the economy is growing, more money, liquid capital to pay people to do work, to be more productive, the money needs to come from somewhere. And so they pressured the private sector into a deficit. We either need to get money from a foreign source globally, the government needs to put it into the economy, or it's coming from the private sector. And all of that private sector debt is what led to the financial crisis. And so the idea that, this was so fiscally responsible, Democrats are the fiscally responsible party, both of you are dog shit. Like, Bill Clinton did a horrible job with that and injecting into people's minds that we need to treat the US federal budget like a household budget, when in fact they're the currency issuer. They should be investing public dollars in things we need, like infrastructure and education that grow the economy as a whole. And so fuck Bill Clinton.
Yeah, fuck Bill Clinton. Also, I'm a huge country music fan, and this is a rant for later, but Bill Clinton kind of ruined country music because he was in the era of deregulation, and he kind of deregulated the FCC in a way that consolidated radio stations and unified, for a big swath of like the rural, quote unquote flyover country. It just really unified. It wiped out local culture and markets, especially in country music, and fuck Bill Clinton for that. I could go on, but
Fuck Bill Clinton for that. But as Mark Blythe said, if you don't like what they're doing in government, just wait for them to die. And we don't have to wait very long for a lot of these Dems. We've got a new dead Dem today.
R.I.P. Jerry Connolly. You burn fast and bright.
What's funny is Ken Klippenstein has been reporting on all of these very old members of Congress. The crazy thing is when Connolly was appointed to be the ranking member of a powerful watchdog committee, Ken was like, hey, this guy's literally dying, everyone. He posts on Twitter reminding everyone House Democrats just picked this guy who's on his deathbed. And the chair of the Virginia Democratic Party quote tweeted Ken and wrote, kill yourself. Or sorry. Delete yourself. Yeah. But then she responded to her own tweet. Yeah. Like a little bit after saying, delete your account. Okay, delete the tweet if you said that and that's not what you meant.
Yeah, that one really has layers, person at the head of a state party fucking up a tweet and then kind of not like, and then like subtweeting herself about a guy. It's like, you're facing a movement that has got their shit together, who's about to wreck your country. And you're like, all right, baby, who we going to like hold these people's feet to the fire? Dead guy? Get in there, baby. It's your time to shine. Not the best strategy. And it turns out that this is kind of a trend. I was reading Ken's story. He pointed out that Jerry Connolly was the third person to die in office this year and the sixth in just over a year. And I kind of started looking this up a little bit more. I found a Business Insider article that says the last 8 members to die in Congress have all been Democrats. What's up with that?
We need some of that super juice, that aborted baby fetus magic juice. That
adrenochrome. We got to go to the pizza shop. It's in the fucking basement.
Turns out Mitch McConnell's the one who's been drinking it.
He's been slurping up the juice, man. That guy stayed alive long enough to do a bunch of bad shit.
Yeah, he really looks like he's slurping up the juice. But yeah, I think about like, oh no, I don't want to refresh the page. I want to stay in the podcast. Yeah, I think about what I was like when I first got engaged in politics. I was energized. I had all of these ideas. I really think that now I've seen a little bit too much. I'm a little bit more like, maybe we'll take it easy. And so I think that young people should be at the forefront of political movements. I think people that are energized should be at the forefront. And like, sure, we need the wisdom of our elders, but it should be imparted upon younger people who are doing the fighting of the fascism.
Yeah, or at least like be open to competition. I mean, because if you like threaten the position, it's almost, this is a problem. It's like, I forget who has the quote, but there's people who want to do something and people want to be something. And there's just a ton of people in Congress who want to be president. And it's like they've waited around for decades to like have their moment in the sun and be on the House Oversight Committee to do what? Like send strongly worded letters as like a movement that actually funded itself, organized, crawled back out of the abyss. I'm talking about the Republicans because they were out of power for a very long time. They did a lot of work to do all of this dismantling that's happening right now. And they're coming up against people who just have been sitting there waiting for their day on the Oversight Committee. And and getting really upset when people take issue with that. I mean, I think to me, do you mind if I go on a little rant?
I'm ready for the John rant about the old
I
people
have a
not
rant
fighting
about
fascism
this.
well.
Yeah, that is what it's about. Because when they're not busy dying in office, these older Democrats who are just holding on to power, they are, taking issue with people like David Hogg, who's asking for competition. But I spend some time on the internet, Jessica, and
What?
I came across a great meme. Maybe we'll share this meme.
Dark Hog.
Dark Hog, that's a meme we're all waiting on. No, this one was about the cycle of fascism, and it really just kind of brought it all home to me because fascists run our government right now. And I think it's really important to understand the cycle that gives them power. And this meme is talking about, the material conditions of people, they get worse, right? And we are in a spot where 60% of people can't afford the basic needs in America right now. So material conditions worsen, then the fascists come in here and they're like, oh, we are going to promise strength and order and a return to national greatness. And they get in there and they hand everything over to billionaires. And that sparks a backlash. And then you get these liberals who come in who are like, can't we just get back to normal? But the problem is nothing changes when they get elected because they don't address the root cause of this problem. Trump to me is just a symptom of the larger problem, which is runaway wealth accumulation, right? Like all of the money is up at the top of the economy by people who have now merged themselves with government and are pushing this legislative agenda that is transferred, that's cutting the very little public services we have, transferring it into their own hands. Of course, that's going to worsen people's conditions. And it's going to continue this cycle where the fascists just, until we address the runaway wealth accumulation, we're going to be in this trap where the liberals get elected and they don't really do anything about this. And then the fascists come back stronger than ever. So I feel like this is all to say we need an opposition party rooted in stopping this crazy runaway wealth accumulation. And those are the kind of candidates that I'm going to be looking for instead of, Jerry Conley sitting there dying on the oversight committee.
Yeah, I think it's weird. I saw Dave Portnoy. I hate talking about Dave. I wish he wasn't a public figure, but he was like, I have this financial advisor and he tells me when things are too tight and I can't spend and I need to calm down. But I go out and I go to the horse races and I'm gambling a ton, I'm buying houses. He's never said like, hey, you don't have a lot of money left, because when you have a lot of money, it just makes more money. It's really hard to lose money once you have it. And his net worth is estimated at about $250 million.
Damn.
So why do rich people act like we have unlimited money when they're accumulating it for themselves? But when working people, 60% of them in the country, can't afford their bills, they're like, well, we're going to have to cut a lot of the social programs you rely on to eat and feed your kids. Like, they know very well there's enough money and resources to support everyone in our country, but they're so arrogant in ignoring it and pretending we have limited resources when it comes to their gambling on horses, third and fourth houses, yachts. It's kind of sickening how Dave feels okay saying that in public.
Yeah, it drives me crazy too, because like, just imagine if we replace the entire government. Like, let's go into La La Land for a while and say we replace the government and everybody's a socialist now. What does a socialist world look like for the people who are currently billionaires? It looks pretty great. Okay. Like, they are going to have all the things necessary to live as well as everybody else. And I'm not even saying, let's back off of utopia a bit. Let's just say we made the billionaires into millionaires. Okay. What does life look like for them? It's great. They have $1 million. Plus, we're talking about getting everybody the public services that they have dedicated their entire life to destroying. Life looks pretty good for everybody in a world, run by the labor left, if that's what you want to call it. But what does the world look like in dictatorship of the billionaires, it's all around us right now. It's, Trump's BBL cutting your grandma off of Medicare and Social Security. It's taking kids in West Virginia off Medicaid. It's, dooming us into a climate hell. It's cutting the regulators who are charged with keeping forever chemicals out of the water, right? The world looks very bad for everyone but the people with the luxury to just kind of treat money in that way, when the world that we're talking about, that everybody seems to think is very radical, is one where everybody has what they need.
You know what can fix this, John, is a liberal Joe Rogan.
Oh, yes. Why didn't I think of that?
Think of that. Okay, but here's the thing. If the Democratic Party didn't quash Bernie's chances from the inside and coup him for a second time, I stand by that. That it was a coup, an internal coup of Bernie. I mean, they straight up said after 2016, we can just pick whoever we want in a back room while smoking cigars, and that would be perfectly legal. Like, that's how they see the primary process. So when everyone dropped out and endorsed Biden, Pete Buttigieg and the like, that felt to me like a coup, because none of those candidates were popular. But because, like, oh, I like Pete, so he's not there. He told me to vote for Joe. I'm going to vote for Joe. Because go Joe. I feel like that was messed up. But Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders. Like, Joe Rogan was the Joe Rogan of the left. So, like, we wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for the party acting like that. So it's not that, oh my God, the solution will be we need a Joe Rogan of the left. The solution is stop fucking acting like that.
Yeah, we need to red pill Joe Rogan. Did I get my pill color right? I can never keep the red pill.
I've never
versus
seen
black
The
pill.
Matrix, but it's about politics. Red pill means like Republican.
Yeah, somebody get Joe Rogan one of those red pills, and that'll help the Democrats out. No, I mean, this is a plan. This happens a lot after a Democratic loss, right? Everybody's trying to figure their way out of the wilderness, and one of the things is like, oh, okay, well, the manosphere is out there sucking a bunch of people into a terrible movement, so we need something to counter this, which is a fine idea. But to me, it's like, okay, you're talking about building a giant bullhorn that's going to be saying stuff. Well, what stuff is it going to be saying? Because you can have a massive media network, but I think the real problem of this party is not it's not a messaging thing. It's what kind of stand are you taking in the new political world? I feel like in a very short amount of time, today is much different than 2012, but I feel like Democrats are kind of still stuck back in that age. We have, I think all the time about the, whatever it is, 11 years ago or something, the Princeton study that said the American public has little to no control over their government because it's dominated by billionaires. That problem's gotten so much worse, and it is at the root of power. And power is what controls every bad thing that you read about in the news. So what is the Democratic Party's analysis of power, and who has it, and who they want to have it, and what they're going to do about a handful of people having way too much of it? I think you have to answer those questions first before you go like building this media network, because there has to be something behind, there has to be something to say. There has to be something for this, what it said, one Democrat had a spreadsheet of 26 different proposals. Okay. Yeah. Like what's the big vision, right? How do you propose that we wrestle control off of people with more money than God who are like currently the president's cabinet? It's just changed so much. But I feel like that's a glaring omission that's made all the time, especially when they're talking about, messaging things or building networks.
Yeah, to get the messaging right on a political agenda, you need to have a political agenda, and they don't. They really don't. Think about what the right's done online with the pushing of videos with crazy machine learning to find people who are susceptible to misinformation, and then flooding their feed with fake news to make them fearful and then angry, and then they become a MAGA voter because they got on Facebook by their machine. They're telling people like the trans women want to be in your daughter's bathrooms, and they're going to do bad stuff to your daughter. And it's like,
Not
they
our
have
daughters.
stuff, like they want to ban trans women from using the women's restroom. That's their thing. And all we say in response is, oh, protect the trans community. How? What does that mean? We never have a plan for anything, even stuff we talk about a lot. And I don't know why I'm saying we. I don't identify with the Democratic Party. But as someone who's worked with a lot of Democrats and progressives, like, progressives are better at this, but still guilty of this. Like, I think progressives have been largely afraid to say with their chest what they're actually fighting for, because they sanitize it based on their projection of what the Overton window is as to what can be receivable by the public. That's what messaging does. You make your agenda receivable with strategic messaging. And so, because they have no backbone, because they're not willing to say capitalism has destroyed the environment, has destroyed life for working people, they have nothing to say, because they can't be honest. They won't let people lead the party who actually have a vision for the country and how to change it and fix things.
Yeah. And then, I think it's like such a weird position to be in, because, on the one hand, I also have worked with Democrats forever, and I don't identify with them anymore, but still you're rooting for the only other party that's out there at scale, when you have such a serious threat with a home in the Republican Party. Like, you want somebody to stand up to this, and it's like, we got this one thing here. And, to me, it's just like, hey, man, I mean, rediscover, if the politics have changed, just adapt to the times. I think there's a reason why people think why people are more favorable on labor unions than they have been at any point in the past. You can tell that the base is really shifting around, and that there's new coalitions possible, but you have to be able to step out and risk that and build something. Where I think the energy that we see right now is shying away from changing anything about themselves and just trying to have more media outlets saying the stuff that just hasn't worked in the past. So I would say to be introspective and look within.
Yeah,
to the
I would
Democratic
love
Party.
to see those fucking pitch decks. What is in there? Nothing good. But speaking of
More dances.
Yeah, genuinely. Speaking of no agenda or effective messaging, let's talk about Gaza. Let's talk about what's going on in the Israel-Palestine sphere. So, there were a couple of murders. 2 people were murdered at the Israeli embassy. This happened shortly after 9 p.m. Eastern time last night on Wednesday. It was Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram. The alleged shooter is Elias Rodriguez. It was right outside of the embassy, near the Capitol Jewish Museum, where they were hosting a reception for young diplomats. And that was the American Jewish Committee hosting it. So lots of folks have sort of flooded X, saying this is obviously a targeted attack. I saw Pete Buttigieg was calling it an anti-Semitic attack. It's the Israeli embassy, right? I really think we need to separate Jewishness from criticizing Israel and retaliating against what Israel is doing and the IDF is doing. Because if we are against Islamic caliphates and we talk about the idea of an ethno-state as some insane religious extremism, when it's anyone but Israel, we have to have some kind of consistency here and not say this is an anti-Semitic attack, and actually separate ethnicity and religion from being mad that Israel is committing a genocide right now.
Yeah. I think, I have thoughts on this. I mean, first of all, I don't condone what happened. I don't think it's a good thing. I want to give credit to Ken Klippenstein, because Klippenstein.
I think it's Stein. But
So sorry, Ken. You're a homie. But Ken posted what appears to be the manifesto from Elias Rodriguez, and legacy media usually won't touch those. They are worried about copycat attacks, so on and so forth. But I would encourage you to go read for yourself on Ken's Substack. I respect him putting that out. Context matters. The manifesto ends with Free Palestine, and the shooter reportedly shouted that at the scene. But I want to be real about what happens next with all of this, because you can imagine how people are going to turn this. There's all kinds of bad faith actors, Trump's people, the right-wing Netanyahu regime, the enablers in both parties. Any mix of those will use this an event to smear anyone calling for an end to the genocide. And that includes, to me, millions of Jewish people who are doing exactly that. They'll try to say that protesters and shooters are the same, and that's the distinction that really needs to be made, because that's not true, and it's dangerous, and it plays right into this administration's strategy to equate everybody who speaks out against this as being anti-Semitic or a supporter of Hamas. You've seen them try to, label that on every single thing. And all of that strategy is being led by people like Kash Patel, who's the director of the FBI. This is a person who is outspoken in wanting to use the power of the federal government to hunt down political enemies. He's already called this anti-Semitic violence and, promised a crackdown. But the thing to watch with that is the erasure of difference between a shooter and someone who is protesting on campus, which I feel like is the direction that bad faith actors are going to take this. It's just another setup. And, the other thing is, while this event's a tragedy, 2 people are dead, the fact that 2 folks are dead should not blot out, to me, what is happening in Gaza right now. We have seen credible media outlets, many of them report that 14,000 children are at risk of starvation. Dropsite just recently reported that aid is being weaponized. The right-wing ministers of the Israeli government are openly talking about occupying and cleansing this territory and using aid as a way to draw people out of the territory and continue pushing them out. And, as all of this is happening, we are seeing figures who have resisted going as far as calling it a genocide now just changing their position. I saw Mehdi Hassan on Piers Morgan. Piers is someone who definitely did not agree with Mehdi Hassan or go as far as to call this a genocide, but now he has changed in that position along with a lot of other folks who took a long time to get there. So I think the takeaway for me is it's never bad to speak out against genocide, obviously. And saying Free Palestine is not anti-Semitic. And I would point to the millions of Jews who are saying that too, and who have nothing to do with an event like this shooting. So
I feel like Piers Morgan, it was only a matter of time before he came around on this, because he's someone who has been platforming key voices on Palestine and actually is open to talking to people whose views different from his own.
yeah,
And so I feel like it makes sense that he's one of the people that flips, but also, Theo Vaughn came out and he had just visited the Middle East. And he's like, this is horrible. This is a genocide. We have to call it what it is, basically. And so it's crazy that we have people on the right, like Theo Vaughn is on the right, but people like Jackson Hinkle, who calls himself a MAGA communist, whatever that means, really critical of what's going on in Israel. But then also he's a weird figure. I'm not saying he's right on the whole issue, but it feels so weird to see folks on more extreme ends of the political spectrum be totally against the center on so many issues. And that really describes our politics so much. And Gaza has been one of the huge fracture points.
Yeah. I mean, I look at all of Theo's a good example. I think maybe a good litmus test for I feel like this information, so much of it is suppressed. A lot of it is coming, it's hitting people's eyes and ears at different speeds, because of our algorithms and echo chambers and the political biases of our news media. But when you see people like Theo Von flipping, you know something's up. And it makes me think, as this is all coming to a head, as it's being so, as their ministers are being so blatant about it. Obviously, we've had pictures and videos coming out of there that are horrible for such a long time. But I came across this quote. It's an author, Omar El Akdad, put out a tweet October 25th of 2023. This is 3 weeks after October 7th, that said, one day when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anybody accountable, everyone will always have been against this. And it feels like things are changing out there with everybody who's kind of flipping.
Yeah, that point is coming closer than I would have guessed a month ago. But as we see aid trucks waiting to get into Gaza being blocked by the IDF, it makes sense that people people now. Miss Rachel, who's a huge children's YouTuber and author, has been posting a ton about what's happening in Gaza, especially for the children. She's getting criticized in all directions. People saying, does she care about all children or just the children of Gaza? Jewish mothers feel isolated. And it's like, from Miss Rachel, really, who's showing literal videos of children who look so malnourished and skeleton-like while she's holding her own baby, who she's still breastfeeding, saying, I can't imagine if I wasn't able to feed my own child. And look at this baby. Are you okay with a baby looking like this anywhere in the world, knowing this is preventable? Like, we all have to stop this. And so because it's a message that is now coming from some unlikely figures, like who would think that the most popular, children's YouTuber lady would risk her huge platform, she's probably raking in millions and millions, to say something about this? It's coming from unlikely corners of the internet and the world. And you had, what's that comedy actor's name who spoke out about NYU? There's an NYU speaker who used her time addressing the graduation ceremony to talk about Palestine and the genocide. And then NYU retaliated against her and is taking disciplinary action against her. And I forget his name. He's a big, LA type comedian who's in a bunch of shows. But he was like, oh, NYU, the bastion of free ideas. And he showed a brochure where they basically say where you can have, free ideas and learning. And he's like, apparently not. And it was a really good little monologue. And so when it's coming from people who are big public figures like that, it matters. But also even people who are major public figures from the EU who go on these invited trips to Israel are not free of the ready violence at the hands of the IDF. So there was a group that was visiting a refugee camp. This was a delegation from EU nations. They were in the Palestinian city of Jenin, and they had this approved route that they were supposed to be on, and they deviated from it a bit and entered an area where they were not authorized to be. Why? Maybe they would see something there. Who knows? But Israel's foreign ministry said in a statement on social media after that the warning shots were fired because they deviated from the general path and they needed to scare them away. That's insane. But that's the last thing I wanted to say as far as our updates. John, any last thoughts on Israel-Palestine?
No, I mean, it's wild. It's wild to see. I'm just glad that a perceptible change is happening, and you have these large figures speaking out. I mean, it's about time.
Yeah.
You've got some serious news, right, Jessica? So you have been hard at work over at Dropsite, a place that has been putting out all kinds of great stuff, and it looks like you've got some work happening there.
Yes, this one is not about Israel-Palestine, but a lot of our reporting is. This one is about my home, Iowa. So there was some polling done about the potential Democratic challengers to Senator Joni Ernst. She is our senator here in Iowa. In a head-to-head matchup, she led all of the potential candidates by 5 or 6 points. But then they gave a short profile on each of the candidates that may run, which include Nathan Sage, who, if you listen to the show regularly, you've heard my interview with him. Jackie Norris, who was the chief of staff of First Lady Michelle Obama, and she runs a management consulting firm here in West Des Moines. Zach Walls, who famously has two moms and wrote a book, My Two Moms, gave a speech about marriage equality. He is an Iowa State senator from Iowa City, which is a very liberal place. He went to Princeton. You get the vibes. Then there's J.D. Schulten, who is a known progressive, ran against Steve King, really outperformed what people were expecting. He's like our right-wing mainstay in northwestern Iowa. He turned that into a seat in the Iowa legislature. He's been there for a few years. He's kind of like, someone who's been in the progressive movement for many years, since Bernie 2016 and stuff. So now what's exciting is the results of this poll show our boy, Mr. Populist Nathan Sage, Mr. I'm a revolutionary, not a radical, the only candidate who was able to beat Ernst in a matchup after voters knew who he was. Now, 47 to 45 is, it's a tight race, and the margin of error was 4 points. But even considering the margin of error, he is ahead of the entire field. That means something, because Democrats have a choice to make. What they tend to do is, if there's an anti-establishment candidate running, they will try to quash their chances of winning. They have tended to put millions of dollars into the contenders that are more aligned with the corporate class, the party elites, and Nathan's not that at all. He is one of the anti-establishment candidates that they would maybe favor Norris or Walls over. And so Sage is someone who connects with Iowans. He is a common man. He is a working class guy. He was a mechanic. He did 3 tours in Iraq. He grew up in a trailer park. He was a sports radio host. He talks like a blunt working class guy. And so in Iowa, that matters a lot. People here are sick of party elites coming in, especially because it's the first primary contest for the national, contest for deciding who's going to be the nominee for president. People here know politics. They know politicians. They're sick of people from the Democratic Party putting up a front who are really the elites, who don't get them, don't get their lifestyle. And so I think Nathan came out ahead because he was told to these poll respondents, Sage is a lifelong independent. He cares about the working class. He's a veteran. He was a mechanic. And he's basically like, if the Democrats could build a factory, or could build a candidate in a factory to win in Iowa, it would be Nathan Sage. And I really am afraid that the party establishment is going to choose to kick the anti-establishment populist candidate out, potentially at the cost that it's a sacrifice they're willing to make of having a Senate majority in the U.S. Senate. And so that sucks, but the poll is good.
Yeah, this is shaping up to be a really interesting race, and I think the person to really keep an eye on in the Democratic in the Democratic primary for shenanigans is Zach Walls. Would I be right about that?
Yeah, he's a bit of a darling of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that's what they do, really. I mean, it's kind of like at the upper, once everybody's in the Democratic Party right now. I think most of them, they really started out as a darling at one point, and then they just kind of hang around, they hang on to power, and they cultivate their own, really. So they, it's often talked about how the Democrats really don't have a farm team, but they do have a bench of candidates, but that bench comes from usually safe districts, and it's always these types like Zach Walls that are kind of waiting in the wings, biding their time, not making any kind of a fuss, strategically voting on stuff to build a track record to debut in a statewide race with the help of other, National Party Democrats. And that he seems like the candidate where we would see that kind of stuff. I'm curious, Jessica, you sat down with Nathan Sage for a while there. Was there anything that didn't make it into the piece that you just put out for Dropsite that you want to talk about with Nathan Sage?
I linked the interview I did with him in this piece, and there's so much there that, just doesn't show up in quotes in the piece. But I think it's so hard to tell people, like, I'm being objective as someone who grew up working class when I say he doesn't have an ounce of politician vibes in him. And there's a conversation happening right now saying Democrats swear all the time. They're doing it to, reconnect with everyday people, whatever, seem cool. Um, when Nathan swears, he was a mechanic. That's just how he talks. It rolls off of his tongue. He's blunt. He is so unafraid to criticize the very wealthy in our country more than anyone I've ever seen who's running for office. And so he represents this kind of populist revolution in a way that, like, we didn't really see happening until, like, Dan Osborne, right? And so there's this new breed of populist candidate that, Nathan's really the center of. And it's hard to say that without sounding like I'm asking for your vote for Nathan Sage, but that is what I think is an objective opinion, just as someone who grew up working class and is an Iowa voter now.
Yeah, and I know Iowa's a really interesting state because it's like one of those. It's one of those states that was it had a ton of Democratic representation not too long ago, but it's been a heartland state like so many of the other ones that are trending conservative. But maybe in that trend, there are lanes that are opened up for anti-establishment candidates. I think which it definitely seems like Nathan Sage is. I think the hurdle that they have to get through, of course, is a Democratic primary where the core of the party really doesn't like anti-establishment vibes. Do you think if he were to prevail in that primary, do you think there would be any pushback from the rest of the party in Iowa based on his kind of anti-establishment stance, or does it seem like he would fit right in with trying to put Iowa back in the Democratic column?
It's a good question. He did say on MSNBC on April 20th, I want to tear the Democratic Party down and build it back up from the studs. So yeah. I think, I don't know, my hope and prediction, because I believe in good things happening, is that the establishment will no longer be there to say anything by the time Nathan wins. That, the people will make clear that they don't want the establishment making decisions anymore. And that's me manifesting. But yeah, I think if he wins, like Iowa won, Trump won Iowa by 13 points this last time. Joni Ernst had a pretty slim win margin comparatively. So people were voting for Trump and not voting for Ernst, which is interesting. Iowa also swung for Obama previously in 2008. He won the state by 9 points. And so I did mention this in the piece, but basically in Iowa, what wins is not like a right or left thing. Sure, it's been called a purple state in the past. It was the first state to pass marriage equality legislation. But what really matters more than like right or left is populists win. Anti-establishment populists like Obama and like Trump win here. And so, yeah, like if the Democratic Party allows populists to be associated with them, Nathan could be the new face of that.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I got to say here too, because there's a personal buddy of mine who might jump into this, but he's also kind of out of that populist wing. But I'm talking about J.D. Scholten here. This is a guy who has been kind of claiming the keeping the populist flame alive out there, traveling around in an RV in very red parts of the district, talking about anti-monopoly practices and breaking up some of the large agriculture that's plagued the state for so long. It's going to be interesting to see. But this is all speculation, of course, because Nathan Sage is in the race and these other folks that were polled, some of them are, some of them are not. is my understanding. But it looks like we're going to have a showdown of populist in the core of the party here, possibly with more populists than not for once.
Yeah, yeah. I'm interested to see if this becomes a super flooded race. Like, are we going to get everyone on a debate stage? What's it going to look
Mm-hmm.
like? What does it mean for so many resources going into a Democratic primary in a state where Democrats have been written off and haven't been organizing? Right?
Mm-hmm.
When Nathan was about to run, I didn't hear anything about anyone else running. And then he announces, and suddenly everyone's running, which I find interesting. So,
Interesting. There's a
um,
there's a bunch of people trying to liberate Iowa. Would you say that
that
liberation is the thing that they're focused on out
was
there?
such a good segue, John. Thank you. So
I
we're
was
going to
really
talk.
trying to emulate you. You have been nailing segues, so
um, yeah, the art of the segue. No one's better at a segue than Adrienne Lawrence, who used to work at ESPN, and then I worked at TYT with her. Holy shit, if you ever listen to Adrienne Lawrence, it's like it just comes naturally to her. And she does it as such a news person, like exactly like you just said. But imagine it in the most newscastery professional voice ever, and she'll just start rattling off the next subject. It's insane. Anyway, so um, I've learned from the
liberation.
best. Uh, okay, so this is a crazy thing. I first talked about this with my boyfriend, and then I talked about it on my friend's podcast, and now I'm comfortable saying it publicly all the time, which is usually the process of me deciding I'm gonna be on one beat for a while. You're gonna probably hear me say this a lot. This is something I'm about to say something that could piss off the Democrats, white progressives, a lot of people. Okay, but here it is. Think about who has successfully won liberation and freedom in America. It is Black people. Think about globally who has defeated imperialism to liberate entire nations. It is Pan Africanists. It is people fighting colonial rule. I'm thinking of figures like Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah. I'm thinking about all of the Black leaders we know coming out of the American South. Why is it that as we're in this movement where supposedly we are fighting for liberation from our capitalist overlords, we don't say, hey, what's worked before? Why don't we ask Black people how they won? Why don't we study Black movement leaders and see what they did and actually do the stuff that we know has worked? I think it's casual white supremacy among white people in the Democratic Party who are in positions of power. I think it is, um, if it's not white supremacy, it's casual racism. And we really need to talk about it because it seems like the obvious thing that there are tactics that have worked that we are ignoring. I think it's simply because while white progressives are like, oh, I can't be racist because I support equal rights. Um, but then in conversation, they won't, fully listen to a Black comrade's points. They won't fully take it seriously, and they'll make weird comments about, oh, why is their hair like that? Why do they talk like that? And not think that that's racism because they're like, no, but I support equal protection under the law. I don't want them to be brutalized. But also, you don't fully see them as equal, do you? As a human being on a spiritual level. And I think we need to interrogate this because I think we're leaving so much power on the table by not asking people what has worked in the past because this oral history has been passed down and it's there for us to learn from.
That's for sure. White's been out here fucking it up for a minute. And hey, I just think of man, the Panthers in their free lunch program, where they were, populations not only completely cut out of society and government, but like built on top of, a society and a government built on top of people that then cut them out of this. So it was out of that need that you had a couple, the list of innovations of a community trying to survive is very, very long. But I think of the Black Panthers providing free hot meals to kids, and that later got factored in to the school free lunch program, which is now happening, but kind of took that out of the realm of something that a community provided and institutionalized it within government. And now, those benefits are being slashed by billionaires who see them as kind of a threat to their control over a population. But that right there, just one program. I mean, you can see in the people who fight against free lunches how important it is and how close it comes to threatening the power of the people who are, slashing the hell out of all of our public benefits. That program came out of the Panthers. I think about their community defense initiatives, right? You want to get Republicans to support gun control. Get a couple of Black Panthers who are armed in the California state legislature. All of a sudden you see people like Ronald Reagan coming out again in favor of gun control. But really, it was out of necessity, and those communities have a lot to teach us right now as power is concentrated in so few hands. We need to look to the communities who saw that, responded, and survived.
Right. And unlike the Democratic Party, I think like on this show, the Jess and John pod, JJ Nation would like to be liberated, right? That's what we're fighting for. And so we have to learn from these ideas. So I want to do as I say we should do, and learn from Kwame Nkrumah, who led the struggle for freedom in Ghana. This goes to what you were just saying, John, which is why I'm going to start with this. But he said the best way of learning to be an independent sovereign state is to be an independent sovereign state. We talk about ruling class oppression all the time. And John, I think what you do in Wheeling is such a good example of this, but like really
Oh, shucks. Oh, no. The deep state has taken out Jess's camera, which is why you heard this audio interruption.
Big L for me. Okay, so I think you do this. You have a community of people who can help provide for each other. How do we create systems that are independent from the capitalist infrastructure we have and keep money within our community and not going to the ruling class and grow our own food? Like, I'm on all of that shit type of beat. I think we need to buy cell phone towers and create our own cell phone service. Like, this is some good ideas. I'm holding up Kwame Nkrumah's book for people who don't see this, but there's just some good shit there. Revolutions are brought about by men who think as men of action and as men of thought. So a problem with the Democratic Party is they'll entertain these radical ideas, some of them, but then they would never dream of doing anything about them. And like, there's just so much good stuff that we should learn from. Like, we should not be learning from, I'm sorry, but like people who are white guys who led labor strikes and spend most of their time in the office of a nonprofit as the executive director. Like, I'm sorry, but those people are not going to lead us to freedom and liberation.
Yeah, that's a fair point too. I mean, every one of these institutions that we're going to look to get us out of this mess, most of them are living in that same political world that died. We're in a new world where the Democratic Party and most of its leadership is not equipped to respond to it. And that the same goes for a lot of legacy unions. And I think we've got to learn, and we've got to learn fast. And there are people to learn from. And you're talking about some of them right now. And I do think it's really good to put that into practice, because we can talk on a podcast for a long time and we can wait on these people to come around. But really it needs to happen faster than that. And it's got to be driven by all of us, right? Nobody's going to save us but us. And, I think the general points you're making here is like, put this into practice in your own life, right? If you don't know your neighbors, you got to go meet your neighbors right now. If there is a group of people who are like-minded and close to you, it's time to start having fun with a purpose. When I think of like the really good things that we've done in Wheeling, and I might be the spokesperson for them, but by no means am I the driving force of all this. We have a really good group of people here who's getting mutual aid off the ground, doing a community kitchen, where, And there's a difference between charity and mutual aid. This is for us, right? It's not like, oh, high-minded people with disposable income helping out homeless folks. It's like, no, we have a group chat, and like a lot of us are tired of paying crazy grocery prices. So we're like partnering with different places. We have a public market here. If they've got food that's about to expire and they got to get rid of it, okay, we're going to take that and we're all going to go to the. We have a friend who's a pastor who opens up their church kitchen, and 15 of us are going to cook a meal, and it's going to be fun together. And we're going to take home 3 meals, and bam, there you go. We just stepped outside of Kroger and their dynamic pricing. And it's time to start doing that and finding ways to do it. But the thing is, the Black community's been doing this forever.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like the kind of sentiment, like freedom is not something that one people can bestow on another as a gift. They claim it as their own and no one can keep it from them. That's very different from the message of the Democratic Party leaders of vote. This is the one thing you have to voice your public voice in your democracy. No, you can take it into your own hands. And that's what they don't want you to know. And that's the part of liberalism that lends itself to imperialism and capitalist structures. And I've heard a lot of people say fascism is just imperialism and colonialism when it reaches white people. But if you're a person of color, especially in an imperial nation, you experience that. And if you're not an imperial nation, you experience it through weird soft power, through existing colonial ties, etc. And there is actually a group of people who is living exactly this, taking freedom into their own hands and not letting Ticketmaster tell them what to do.
Oh, you
The
stole my.
All-American Rejects. Did you think of that too? Was that your transition?
Yeah, I was gonna hop in there, and I was nailed it. Nice.
Great minds, John.
The All-American Rejects, if you're old, you might know them. If you're young, you might have seen them on TikTok. They are a sad boy pop punk band. Turns out they're from Oklahoma. I didn't know this. They dubbed themselves the All-American Rejects because they weren't kind of the culture back when the sad boy emo music was popping off and the eyeliner was thick. But they have come back onto the scene, exploded back onto the scene with a bright idea and a message. And the bright idea is to play punk rock shows, pop punk shows in people's backyards. And this has taken the internet by storm. People are out there. It's like, they're like, oh, honey, that band that's playing in the neighbor's backyard sounds a lot like the All-American Rejects. And it is. The footage coming out of these shows is absolutely wild. But the thing is, you've got the lead singer out there tearing it up and then taking breaks and saying, this is what the rock and roll experience is supposed to be. And we are doing this tour so that an entire generation of young people right now, working class kids who do not have a lot of money, have access to the kind of rock and roll that was around when our band got started and has been gatekept by these huge corporate outfits like Ticketmaster, who are charging you ridiculous fees, where the parking is $25 and the ticket looks like it's one price and then it doubles by the time you get to checkout. All of this has been messaging coming from the band, the All-American Rejects, as they're going around the country playing backyard shows for $5 a ticket, and really taking it to Ticketmaster. And you know what? We love to see it.
I'm so here for this. This feels to me like the beginning of marrying the anti-capitalist movement with the culture.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like people, okay, annoying Brooklyn hipsters are a lot of the people when I say people, but it's becoming a bit fashionable to be edgy, to be alternative and such.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in like a Brooklyn hipster way where like daddy pays your rent and you work like a 50K a year job and everything else is supplemented with your family's credit cards. I mean like in a real way where like you're paying $5 to see the All-American Rejects and you're there with your working class comrades. Like we need to stop having this revolution sold back to us in a capitalist way. And this I can't think of a better example than this of that happening.
It's great. We love it. Tyson Ritter, wild man, America's heartthrob, just got impossibly hotter by a critique of corporate overlords. And if you want to become impossibly hot, you should also critique your corporate overlords. And that's on that for every dude under 30 who's getting sucked into the Trump movement. I promise you, take your hotness notes from Tyson Ritter, get a fucking cause, criticize Ticketmaster, absolutely tear it up in somebody's backyard with all the homies.
We need Chapel Roan doing this. We need Chapel Roan in the gay clubs performing for $5.
Yes.
We can beef up the security. We'll make it 10 so she can pay extra security because she needs it. And we want her to feel safe. But god damn it, we need more musicians doing this. I think she signed with like a huge agency that would never let this happen, but
yeah, I was looking at this. I'm like, how is this impossible? Or how is this possible with insurance and shit? And that just makes me like it even more, that I know that insurance is probably a fucking nightmare with this. But I'm like, thank God. You know, the bad times really need good music and good people putting on the music. So props to the All-American Rejects.
I'm so into it.
Do you know what it feels like?
Sing the Spicy Peanut song.
Spicy peanuts. We're really trying to attract advertisers hawking spicy peanuts on the show. If you're a spicy peanuts vendor, buy some ad space on the Jess and John pod.
We'll make a jingle.
We really need it. We'll make a jingle for you. Spicy peanuts.
Spicy peanut noodles.
We'll workshop it. Is that a wrap, Jess?
That's a wrap. We wrapped it. We don't have anything more to say this time, but we're going to see you next time. Locked in every Friday.
Locked in every Friday. Beware of the Trump BBL, everybody. JJ Nash. It's been real.